common in Western world is not very effective in our world. And the spirituality has something which has been proved to be effective in people who are having cancer, who are having terminal illnesses, and all the other things. So, how this can be integrated between psychiatry and mental health services, that is the talk. And there is no other than Professor Gangadhar to talk on this. And we know I am not going to introduce him longer. Everybody knows him. He has been director of an EMANS, and now he is the chairman of accreditation committee of our NMC. But the main thing is that he has lived his life spiritually. Very few people can claim that. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but sir has whole life is an example of how a spiritual person can be. And his contribution to the mental health services is immense. Today, as he is saying that yoga and other things are going to be introduced in mental hospitals. So his role is immense, and this will be a very kind of illuminating topic in today's day, Guru Purnima, starting from today. So with my pranam, I invite Professor Gangadhar to start his deliberations. Sir, unmute. You have to unmute, sir.
I know. I only thanked you when I was muted, so you didn't miss much anyway.
Just before starting, I would like to introduce Dr. Avdesh Sharma to have a few words, and then he can introduce the speaker as well, sir. Dr. Avdesh Sharma ji.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Naresh. I also would not like to come in the way of Dr. Gangadhar, except I want to flag a few things, which I'm sure Dr. Gangadhar anyway would be taking up in his erudite exposition subsequently. We are not living out of context ever. Human beings have never lived out of context. And if you would see what Dr. O.P. Singh was saying, that some of the techniques that have worked very well in certain countries, especially where they originated, haven't done so well. And the reason is not far for us to understand. Very simply because wherever we are, we imbibe from that culture, we imbibe from the parents, we imbibe from the lineage that we have come in. The medication as it is practiced by us has only evolved in the last 40 to 50 years, really. And that also over a period of time, we have seen medication come and go. The psychotherapeutic techniques which we have been practicing, which we have been taught, have not taken our cultural influences ever. And somewhere over a period of time, any one of us who has practiced for more than 10 years would realize that to be able to make a connection, you have to understand the roots of what people think are the origin of their problems. And I'm not talking only about psychiatric illnesses. I'm talking about psychological distress. And especially in the last 1.5 years, in the context of COVID, where people have had to go in, they have had new challenges, people are all over the world anticipating issues, because of which we need to build resilience. And that resilience can only happen in the context that we can talk to people in their own language. Spiritual principles, and I'm not only talking about practices, I'm talking about the spiritual principles, which are always also been part of the religious principles. They started with spiritual principles, all religion, and subsequently they may have had certain ways that they have evolved, but the principles almost remain the same across the world for almost all religion. How can we as mental health professionals bring that back in? And let's not also forget that we are not the only mental health professionals. We are a group of professionals who have been trained, and yet there are lay counselors, there are spiritual leaders who have been able to impart solace and also sometimes treatment to the populations that they serve. Can we in some way include that in our clinical practice? Can we include that in our teaching and training? And can we in some ways make that into an integrated mental health service rather than saying that, these are add-ons, these are complementaries? Can we be in future try and make it into a phenomena where people have the choice and we as practitioners have the bandwidth to be able to deliver those services in whatever way required by the population? And I'm sure Dr. Gangadhar, with his vast experience, not only as a clinician, but as Dr. Tafan Pati said, as a person who has lived many of these principles, having known him for almost 40 years now from Nimhans and subsequently, I can vouch for that. And I think we have no better person than Dr. Gangadhar. We know that he was the director of Nimhans for a long period of time, and now he is in the National Medical Commission, and over there and in future, I think not only for mental health professionals, but for medical graduates, he will continue to make a difference. Professor Gangadhar, please.
Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Avdesh Sharma, for those wonderful introductory remarks. Now I would like to introduce Professor Indra Sharma, as chairperson, first chairperson. She herself is a fellow of WASP and FAMS Psychiatry, and she also did her degrees in law. Currently, she is an advisor, patient rights in Indian Psychiatric Society, legal director, professional protector scheme, and she was a former professor and head of Department of Psychiatry, Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU. And she has a vast experience in research as well in yoga, diploma in yoga. She has done certificate courses in yoga practices for better living. She has a couple of, more than many publications in related to yoga as well. And currently she is also practices in spirituality. So Dr. Indra Sharma, can you have a few words now before I introduce the second chairperson? Dr. Indra Sharma ji. Probably she has to unmute, I think.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, madam.
Okay. Can share the slides. Can you change the slide?
You can just introduce yourself.
Yes.
Your remark. Yeah.
Friends, it's a matter of great privilege for me to chair this session. With Dr. B.N. Gangadhar as the speaker. He is going to talk on a very, very important topic, that is integrating spirituality into mental health. I think this is very important. And we all know that Patanjali has given an 8-path fold for yoga. And the first two are Yam and Niyam. And according to Patanjali, these must be practiced in sequence. So Yam and Niyam, these are the guidelines for behavior. And the Yam consists of the abstentions, and the Yam, the observances of behavior, which is the ideal behavior which one should practice and which promote mental health. So how this is to be integrated into clinical practice to promote positive mental health, I think this is the trade secret which Professor B. and Gangadhar will share with us today. Now, such a great man actually does not need any introduction, but since it is a formality that before any invited guest delivers a lecture, we give an introduction. So I would just like to mention that Professor B.N. Can you change the slide? The B.N. Gangadhar slide, yes. The slide of Professor B.N. Gangadhar. Slide. Okay. Yeah. That's all right. Now, Professor Gangadhar was awarded Padma Shri in 2020. He is the president of the Medical Assessment and Rating Board of the NIMC. This is a very prestigious assignment given to him. Then he has been the director of the National Institute of Medical Sciences and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He has been the fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences. He has done his DSc and which was awarded by Swasthya Yoga University, Bengaluru, and has been the Ordinary Dean, Life Sciences, Swayasa Yoga University, Bangalore. Apart from this, he has been the adjunct faculty on consciousness at the National Institute at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. He has been the president of the Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter from 2012 to 2013, a visiting fellow of the Indian International Brain Research Organization, Vienna, Austria, the consultant to WHO for inspection of tsunami relief projects. He has been the part of the expert committee of DST and the National Ayush Committee for Integrative Medicine. He has been the co-editor of the Asian Journal of Psychiatry from 2009 and an active member of the editorial board of the national and medical journals in the country, and associate auditor of the Acta Psychiatrica Scandinavica from 2002 to 2013, a period of 11 years, and recipient of the coveted Sir C.V. Raman Award and the Doctor's Day Award from the government of Karnataka. Apart from this, he has been associated with the RSS and has played the role of Sangha Chalak of Bangalore Mahanagar. And in addition to all this, he has been authoring number of very prestigious publications, and he has over 300 of them, which are being cited in the international literature. So, Professor Gangadhar, we are indeed really proud to have you here with us, and I hand over the mic to the.
Thank you, Dr. Indra Sharma ji, for the wonderful introduction of the speaker.
I invite you to give your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Indra Sharma ji, for the wonderful introduction of the speaker. Now I'll hand over the proceedings to our moderator, Dr. Rajeshri Ray.
Good evening, everyone. I will really would like Sir to start, and we'll chip in after Sir's talk when we are going to the question answer sessions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. I will share the slides. There it is. At the outset, greetings to each one of you on the Guru Purnima day. One or two lines about Guru Purnima. It is observed as Vyasa Purnima. Vyasa is considered as the person, in a physical sense, a guru, who brought all those Vedas to whatever Upanishads, Mahabharata, who made it possible for all of us to read them. So from a mere text which was heard by another person and he memorized, and it went on and on and on, generations. Now today we have those in front of us. And of course, apart from all these things, what he preached and what he made it available to us as the seminal contribution in the Mahabharata, which he made Lord Ganesha to write. So him we consider as the Guru, and then of course Vyasa Purnima. There are many other concepts of Guru. I don't want to go into those things, but suffice to say, this particular talk on spirituality in mental health and its clinical applications is very appropriate to talk about on this day of the Guru Purnima. So I'll run through some of the slides. Slides are more to me to keep the track, keep my talk on the track. I believe somebody was telling me that whenever you start talking about spirituality, if you are not yourself spiritual, which I am not, you can potentially derail and fall off. So to help me to keep myself on the spiritual track, these slides are now going to help me. So bear with me for these boring slides on a very serious topic of spirituality. So having said this, although spirituality and health did not even attract me for a long time, until at some point of time in mid 90s or late 90s, there was an investigation into including spiritual dimension in defining our health, whether it should be social health or spiritual health. Why can't we call it as we are physically and mentally and also spiritually healthy, rather than merely saying socially healthy? Although I believe they were right, but they went on to investigate, and I understand that they could not come up with a acceptable definition of spiritual health, and it was dropped. Spiritual health remained. Social dimensions of health. Of course, people wrote articles, books on this issue. Suffice to say that for some reason or other, spiritual health could not be officially introduced into the definition of health by the WHO. People kept researching, and as recently as a couple of years ago, a series of authors who joined together to see whether spiritual health, they went on to in Iran, went on to interview some adults. It's a qualitative study, in-depth interviews, and then they went on to examine different constructs they would call as a spiritually healthy person. So, for some reason or other, although many of you may not accept this definition, some method of human connection with God, as what they would say, if those people who are godly were considered spiritually healthy. Whether you're right or wrong, but that is one study. I'm sure somebody else would get something else. And you interview another 22 people, you will get some other definition. So it eventually ends up as blind people defining an elephant. And indeed it is so. And indeed it is so. It's a concept we have not been able to define in its completeness. Although each one of us know what is spiritual, if anybody is asked what is spiritual, there can be some difficulty in making this definition. Ayurveda, of course, much older medical text, had already introduced the definition of health, which included prasanna atmendriya manaha, prasanna atma, my spiritual world, I'm spiritually feeling well. So what it is, when you want to define subsequently, we're going to face challenges. But the fact remains that our definition of health included not just physical health, not just mental health, but spiritual health as well. So this is as far as trying to get spirituality into health formally, there are some challenges. And when we go on to make more definitions of spirituality, I'm sure many of you may or may not agree with all what I'm going to say. You may have a different view, you may have a different way of defining spirituality, but I have gathered information here and there, and this is what I've been using when people say, what is spirituality? It is a faith, your personal faith, that there is something beyond me, beyond a human individual. There is some other force, energy, something else is there beyond me. This concept, if I am able to accept, follow, and have faith in, then that would be a spirituality. And how do I make my move towards realizing that spirit beyond me? Would be the spirituality that I will practice. So there are many other adjectives to define spirituality. Something that cannot be experienced by our physical senses. Yes, of course. That is something that is beyond worldly, and I don't have a sense organ to perceive this. But I know I experience it. Which organ experiences this, I really don't know. I experience spirituality. I experience that connect with that higher soul. Not all of us, some of us, none of us. And even if some people do experience this, this is for a very brief while. But the fact is that each one has his own or her own experience of this experience of connecting with that superior soul. And that is not through known physical senses that we, of course, talk about. And an yearning to connect to this cosmic is what is seen in people who are spiritually healthy. So I'm continuously seeking this connect with that cosmic thing in quotes. So this something, some energy, some strength, some source, which is beyond me, is something that I need to connect to, and I need to experience that. I want to experience that. And of course, at the end, I accept and I feel for this cosmic thing. So if that happens, I think a person is spiritual and is spiritually healthy and so on and so forth. So in effect, we know there is going to be some difficulty in conceptualizing concretely spirituality, as spirituality is not an experience that is known through known sense organs. That's the reason why there can be difficulty in uniformly making this definition. But these are all the concepts that would probably communicate to the other individual what is the meaning of spirituality. There are, of course, several other translations that are possible when you are talking about spirituality, which a spiritual individual manifests. So it is something like what we call as genome, and what it expresses as what we're going to be seeing in a behavioral sense. So if you want to say that spiritual is something, of course, not gene though, is something that you are bestowed with and you have gained, whatever it is. And if you have so gained, and that it should manifest in some of these features more abundantly than a person who actually may not be spiritual. But again, I was told by a Swamiji in one of the talks, there is a thing called as person who is not spiritual. It is a question of how much he is spiritual. And these behavioral expressions tell me that how more a person is spiritual than the other person. But by nature, we all are spiritual in one or other form. And that spirituality expresses in us for some point of time, briefly, for a longer period, in some other form, in a different way. But each of us can show that spirituality in our behavior at some point of time by design or involuntarily. So the spirituality or that spirit or that energy is a common feature for all of us. But for some, it is by their efforts, they can increase or decrease that. But for most other people, and that's the reason why we hear for some people that spirituality quotient is so high that without their efforts, they become prodigies, and then they reach out to people. And that's how we heard Shankara was a success as early as when he was in 20s. And there are many such people. We hear that, we really don't know whether that is in fact demonstrable today. But nonetheless, spirituality is some energy quotient that we have it, some or more, and we can increase it or of course can decrease it. So what are the expressions that you see in the way in which spirituality manifests in us? There are some examples I have given here. I'm sure it doesn't require elaboration. From a worldly life to a life for the world. You live for the world rather than living for yourself. When they say worldly life, is that those material benefits of the world I would like to experience for myself. Whereas a spiritual person would actually be living for the world, for the others. Likewise, a person who yearns for spiritual track, spiritual mindset, spiritual realization would definitely have a purpose beyond those objectives which will meet the mundane needs. So a purpose beyond mundane needs, in effect, is another manifestation of a spiritual properties of that given individual. One want to expand his consciousness from merely me to we. Please note, all these things are more or less shades of gray which overlap on each other. But each one describes this behavior of an individual who is spiritually enlightened, who is spiritually transcended, who is spiritually going up. These are the things that people would observe in them. And if for yourself, you would also see that me has gotten lesser and the we is growing in me. And that's how I become more spiritual. And of course, I am able to connect with others. And others also are able to connect with me because I am more spiritually advanced, or I'm trying to realize that spiritual strength better in me. I'm able to wake up that spiritual energy in me. And I'm able to experience that connectedness with other individuals. In fact, one of the persons, a teenager who was practicing yoga, said that, I practice yoga, uncle, because I am able to connect with people. And when I asked her, what do you mean by connected? She said, yes, when I go out, I feel people are all the same. It is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I'm not alone. I don't have to feel anxious. I don't have to feel alone. People are with me. Do you really talk to them? Do they talk to you? No, no, I know that we are all same spirit. We are connected with each other. So this experience, I don't know how she worded it, how others can word it, I have no idea. And whether words can really describe that non-worldly experience of spiritual connection, I still don't know. So within the common terminologies that they use the word this connectedness, and I believe we understand each other what does the connected means. But that connectedness for me could be a different connectedness for Dr. Avdesh Sharma or Dr. Rajeshri. They may be experiencing when they are going spiritually higher and higher up, that connectedness could be a different experience for them. All this spiritual growth that is happening in me will also produce secondary changes. Apart from what others see in me, I myself experiences some other benefits, like my anxiety goes away. I know that people are all with me. We're all together. I'm not alone. My depression lifts and I'm able to be helpful, interactive, socializing. My negative symptoms of schizophrenia go away. Then, of course, my physical health is also benefited because once the stresses go away, their effects on my body are released and then my body becomes more natural than what it otherwise would have been because of the pressures that I have deliberately introduced on these people, on my body. So in effect, summarizing, the spiritual growth in me can manifest in different ways, which I experience, which others see and others experience, and in turn, which will also produce secondary benefits on even physical, non-spiritual growth of this individual. So these translations apart, we also have to have a good toolkit to make ourselves grow in the lines of spirituality. We talked about what is spiritual health. Why should we be worried about this concept of spiritual health? The definition, etc., has been attempted. Although Ayurveda has said that allopathy is still trying to work, and the modern medicine is trying to work on how to define this. And we, of course, try to define spirituality. We try to see what a spiritual individual could be identified with. We did that. And of course, we have to also now talk about what practices can help me to grow in that spiritual realization or transcendence. How do I define, how do I become we from me? How do I realize that me itself? How do I know who that me is? So these are all questions people have been trying to seek truth from. The fact remains, we need to have a well accepted practice that will help us grow this spirituality in myself. The last sentence be the first sentence that all of you have to remember. There is no only one right method. Each one has his or her own method, and many people have been successful in that method. But the fact remains, we all have to accept with that humility that there is no only one right method. Vyasa is not the only guru. For each person, guru manifests differently. For someone it is Dakshinamurti, and somebody is Vivekananda, or somebody else, another person, his mother is the guru. The guru is the way people see can be different. Likewise, the paths to that spiritual attainment of spiritual transcendence can be different. So, the common one is taking the name of God. If you recall, one of the definitions of spiritual health is how godly a person has been. This was the group of Iranian mental health people who went on to interview qualitatively 22 people, and then finally ended up with the definition of the connectedness with that God and the thoughts of God is considered as spiritual health. And of course, many methods of attaining spirituality do converge on this concept of God. Accepting or trying to get a physical entity for that superhuman power, you call it as a God. You call it as a God, a idol, or a tree, or a water, you name it. Or a leaf, or a star, or the sun, of course, the moon, etc., etc. You conceptualize that superhuman spirit as a God. And of course, the God, for most of us, the temple, the Balaji, or the Hanuman, we see that superhuman thing or superhuman energy in that individual or in that idol or in that concept. Of course, we know people who also spoke about that God is actually within you. If God can pervade everywhere, he ought to also pervade within you as well. And so, to reach the God, you don't have to necessarily go all the way to a given temple, Vaishno Devi, and trek up, but you could actually start trekking inwards. And the trekking inwards and to reach that God, which you think is the superpower, is another method of realizing spirituality. In fact, people who have been the first group of people go to realize this to that given temple or to that pilgrimage are generally seen as lower mortals than those who are trekking inside. But to me, like I said, all methods are same. All methods lead you to that realization. It is a question of me wanting to get that realization through methods may vary. So there is a religious method and of course non-religious methods as well. So these non-religious methods are much more universal. They do not, of course, bring the issue of God. It does not mean bringing the issue of God and other methods are contradictory to each other. This is again to remind you that there's no one method which is the right method. There is no one method which is the wrong method. There's no one method which is contrary to the other method. But it is just that your inner yearning to reach that superhuman consciousness, superhuman energy. And you will, of course, have your own ways to reach that. And of course, the one of them, of course, the people have been talking about inculcate universal love and compassion. Whether doing this makes you more spiritual or you being more spiritual gives you this quality in your life. This is an issue which people have been debating, but a method of attaining this spiritual quotient higher in yourself is that you develop methods of compassion, feeling for others. Again, I need to say that you tend to become more spiritual, you automatically have that. Another concept that people in our culture have been talking about, this is not common in other cultures though, is the concept of rebirth. And that my energy is there, I lose my body, as Lord Krishna says, and it comes back. And when it comes back, and when I come back, I need to have a better life, more enlightened life. And so I need to have more punya. Again, where rebirth concept is not there, the punya has no word in that culture as well. So the rebirth and the punya go together. So how do you collect that punya? Punya is some sort of a bank account. Today I can closely equate it to the Bitcoin, where only you know that you have it. Nobody else will know. The password is known to you only, and it can keep growing, providing you keep doing what is required to increase that punya in your bank account. This is going to be useful for the next generation or in your next life. If you don't need it, somebody else will use it, your own people. So paropakara punyaya papaya paripidam. This is again the Vyasa has said. You live for others. Like I said initially, that spiritual life, from the worldly life to the life for the world. Paropakara punyaya. That punya will increase, and so this rebirth concept is linked to that. I know for our culture, this does not require any more description, and most people know it in one or other form by stories. My grandmother has told this story. My mother has told this story. I've seen many movies which have talked about rebirth, etc., etc., etc. But this concept is linked to this concept of spirituality. So at the end, keep this in mind. There is no only one right way to achieve this. So what is the way I talk about? And this again, not the only right way, but this is a way. And this is a way which has been tested, time tested, and people are accepting it more and more. And people are willing to practice this more and more. And like Dr. Indra Sharma ji also spoke about yoga, yama, niyama, etc., etc. So yoga, if you take all those 8 limbs, it clearly talks about a spiritual lifestyle. A spiritual lifestyle is practicing of yoga. Of course, when we say yoga, we may generally be referring to those yoga asanas, which you will see yoga gurus demonstrate on the stage, postures, which is very difficult for you to be able to do it. They will do it at ease and be able to impress. Of course, there many other sadhanas are there which we may not be able to see, but one of them is this yoga they will demonstrate to you, because we can appreciate only those physical senses. So they impress us. The yoga asanas, or even the pranayamas, the kriyas, and of course meditation. all these three are a part of that larger description of yoga. And I still believe, like Madam's style, the slide in which Madam was introduced, Dr. Indra Sharma ji, the last line was Yama and Niyama. In fact, that is the first line. Whether we practice yoga or not, some Yama and Niyama is taught to us right from the time I was born. There are many things that I start learning, and Yama and Niyama automatically becomes a part of my life. Some form or other. I have to take bath, I have to tell the truth, being clean, being truthful. Don't acquire things unnecessarily. Live to that day and not necessarily live for tomorrow, collecting things. So like this, there are many issues which have been talked about. Ishvara Pranidhana, to surrender to that Almighty, whichever is the Almighty. So you already accept that there is a life or a power beyond you. So Yama and Niyama actually are the basis of our yoga and spiritual life sadhana. And that is something that we never talk about it, whether you talk about yoga research or yoga applications in clinical practice, because we have not manualized the Yama and Niyama in day-to-day life. And whatever we talk about may appear so casual, so deprofessionalized, we may not necessarily take it seriously. Take Yama and Niyama seriously, you actually have made it. In fact, Krishna also says, Yuktahara viharasya, Yukta cheshtasya karmasu, Yukta swapnava bodhasya, yoga bhavati dukkha. So in other words, yoga harati dukkha. The point remains that you practice many of these Yama and Niyamas, yoga automatically gets encompassed. So all components of yoga, which Patanjali has said, are equally important. We need to practice each one of them and make sure that our lifestyle becomes spiritual. And this is one time-tested method of transcendence into spiritual life. And in fact, what does yoga mean? In fact, it means to unite. Some yoga ityukto jivatma paramatmanaha. So yoga connects my personal consciousness to that cosmic consciousness. Again, the word connect comes in. Yeah, I will come back to that little later. We, in our clinical practice, whenever I talk about yoga, what are the benefits of yoga? What does this connect mean to myself? Connect mean to my clinical applications? It connects my mind with my body. So a cooler mind, more relaxed body, or a more relaxed body, a cooler mind. So mind, one of them, the yoga helps is to connect my mind with my body, connect my sympathetic with the parasympathetic, make my right and left brain connected. In fact, people have been talking about whether the corpus callosum gets thicker in yoga practitioners. Those are all issues. Of course, we can only see corpus callosum. Maybe this connect may mean much more than what I'm talking about. It connects my thoughts and emotions. There's no incongruousness in my expressions. So I walk the talk. And of course, it connects the networks in the brain. The modern scientists, of course, will look for that networks in the brain. In fact, we also did look for that network in the brain. Of course, we are as mundane as most of others are. So we try to define, looked at whether these networks get better with the practice of yoga. And of course, it did. There are other researchers also who have demonstrated in healthy subjects, some of the networks getting better. We looked at schizophrenia subjects, and networks got better along with their reduction in negative symptoms. So just as much as their internal circuits, networks got better connected and more coherent, their connection with the society and with the family by losing the negative symptoms also got better. So the network inside and the network outside both got manifested with better connections with their practiced yoga. So yuj means to connect. So as this connection keeps happening, some benefit should happen. As I told you in the previous slide, as the connections happen, the brain networks get connected better, the connection to my family gets better, and connection to my society gets better. I evolve as a better person. And like I said, internally also I may feel more connected within myself. As this is happening, I also need to manifest some benefits of this increased connectedness, which one of the properties of yoga. There could be many other properties. One of the properties of yoga, I used to experience this connectedness. And so I'm growing spiritually. And when that is happening, as I am trekking towards that bigger consciousness, connecting my own personal consciousness to the bigger consciousness. And should I not be connecting with the neighboring ones? That girl said, the teenager, as I'm keeping practicing yoga, I feel I connected to the neighboring people. And this schizophrenia individual also felt more connected to his family. And the family also experienced that we got back our lost son, LOST, who went away when he developed schizophrenia. At least emotionally, he is more emotive. And yoga, of course, has been doing this. And this manifests itself as a growing compassion. Although I said, increase your compassion, you become spiritually evolved. But the fact remains that the growing compassion, I feel connected, people are together with me. These are all benefits that manifest when a person continues to practice yoga, which is a spiritual growth, and that has a impact on my well-being. And of course, people have shown that a feeling of connectedness with the which is coming up as practice of yoga got their depression better in clinical practice as well. So a spiritual growth has not just benefits to myself, my body, it can also relieve some of my illnesses, and socially also it can bring more connectedness and a social harmony. And as that lady said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, a world as one family can crop up. The divided family, divided societies, divided countries, divided political groups could possibly come together with the practice of yoga, and of course, kindling that spiritual growth within oneself. No wonder when the Honorable Prime Minister talked about yoga in the when he talked about yoga in the UN, very quickly it was endorsed. The yoga became International Day of Yoga. Masses of people went on to practice, showing that they are all getting together. So we need to advocate a spiritual lifestyle to move from illness of I to the wellness of we. We should get over this mental turmoil, stabilize our mind. Yoga again helps. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is a empowering, and it of course is a secular practice. It is beyond mere religious and ritualistic practices, and it can be acceptable to all the individuals. And yoga is the clinical toolkit for growth in our spiritual endeavor and in spirituality itself. So having said this, I thought more questions could be stimulated. I am open to answering these questions. I'll stop here, and I thank the organizers for inviting me to share these points in today's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It is indeed a very blessed day for us as psychiatrists to be talking about spirituality and mental health on the occasion of Guru Purnima, of course. And what better for us to understand, because spirituality transcends our thoughts in many ways. One of the best, sir has taken us very logically down, trying to systematically help us understand the context of spirituality. What is it? What are the different ways? What are the objectives? And finally, even the toolkit. So he's made it a very management-oriented. And of course, he's like Lord Krishna explaining to us Bhagavad Gita in a management tool. And no wonder, gurus, this term guru is in a management circle in UK, in the US, in the NHS, we used to talk about gurus. And I was, coming from India, I was thinking, why a Britisher is talking about guru? Because they've actually picked up this word guru in management skills, and none other than Lord Krishna talking about it. And one of the best definitions, sir, of spirituality, I think Avdesh sir would remember when Swami Sarvapriyananda ji came to talk to us. And it stuck me, and I have to repeat this, even if there's short of time, I will have to repeat this. I cannot explain it as the way he did. But he said, normally what happens is when we close our eyes, we feel very restless inside. And when we open our eyes, the first question that comes to us, to the person standing in front of me, is, what can you do for me? But when we accept and evolve and adopt these toolkits of spirituality, the reverse seems to happen. When we close our eyes, we find peace inside rather than the restlessness inside. And we open our eyes, instead of thinking what the other person can give me, the first question that comes to my mind is, what can I give you? So this reversal in our whole cognitive appraisal is what probably the journeys, of spirituality gives us. And as Sir was saying, there are different ways, there's a myriad ways, and Ramakrishna has also said, Joto Mot, Toto Pod. I mean, so many ways, the journeys are variable, but we can reach there. Of course, there are a lot of things that we need to talk, and I know we will stretch this time with the due permission of everyone. So there are 13 questions that has already come from the audience. I'm really not sure, and I think still I'm getting some questions coming. So there is a huge lot of questions. I'm really not sure how to go around it, but for the best, I will try and attempt with the permission of the chairpersons, because we are picking up the questions here. A very important question, and I'm going to start with this question. It has come from a very young psychiatrist. And the reason I'm picking this question up is I just felt he's saying that I'm a young psychiatrist in my career. He prefers to remain anonymous. He said, when I go and talk about spirituality, sir, in my colleagues who are absolutely armored with the biological psychiatry weapons, they dismiss me by calling me different names. So here I am, I'm trying to armor myself with a spirituality weapon, but no one is supporting me in this. I feel stigmatized. How do I approach this spirituality subject in my very day-to-day clinical practice? How do I convince my colleagues that yes, there is this concept and it's not just the biological psychiatry? So this is a question which many of us, when we start talking about spirituality, have faced, and I'll be grateful for your comments on this.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the questions or many questions can be answered even better by many of the people who are in the audience as well. I know people who have grown much more, but very specifically to this young psychiatrist, you said young. I'm also young though, nonetheless. If you have to, young in the sense, I've also not grown as much in the spiritual world as I ought to have been. So in that sense, spiritually young fellow, but nonetheless age-wise older. So this young psychiatrist can have this question as to how do I gave this point there. I talked about the biology of the network and of course the spirituality of yoga. So I'm sure there is a intelligent way of blending things that suits the audience. You just have to give the same decoction to everybody, but whether the decoction has to be put, some sugar has to be there or not, or honey has to be there, or the nimbu has to be there, but the decoction has to be given. So I'm sure as he talked, I don't want this individual to think that others would reject him. In fact, more people may want to hear about spirituality today. And I know very young people also want to know what exactly is the meaning of the spirituality. Not that I'm able to convince them, but they are yearning. They are all trying to seek answers. So whatever the answers that this man knows, he can tell them. Not all will accept all his answers, just as much as I told you, each one would be experiencing spirituality in a different way. Be assured, when you're going to be talking about spirituality, it is not 1:1 equation. It's going to be different, and that is the challenge which he has to grow up with. And I'm sure more and more he talks about it, he will learn to present the spirituality on the plate as what that would appeal to the others.
So there's another question, sir, from Dr. Narasimha Rao. does inclusion of spirituality in the management of psychiatric disorders decrease the influence of medical and scientific approach?
Rajeshri, I think I didn't catch that thing.
Yeah, it says, does inclusion of spirituality in the management of psychiatric disorders decrease the influence of medical and scientific approach? So the fact that we're talking about spirituality in our management of psychiatric disorders, is it sort of undermining the influence of the other medical and the scientific approaches that are already in system and in place?
Yeah, I don't know how to counter this concept. Would teaching spirituality make my approach in the same question as the young psychiatrist asked, the biological approaches, am I going to undermine them? I don't want this to be seen at all in the way. Like I started with a hardcore biological treatment, the electroconvulsive therapy. And I don't think talking about yoga and spirituality is going to make me any less committed to practicing electroconvulsive therapy. This is an example. I'm not saying that I need to be idealized, but they're not contradictory. In fact, the last thesis that was done under my guidance was examining practice of yoga in individuals who are receiving electroconvulsive therapy. Would yoga practices in between those session days would lessen the cognitive adverse effects of electroconvulsive therapy? There are ways. You have to have faith in the system that you are practicing, and you must also know their applications, limitations. Though there is nothing, Narasimha Raoji, there is nothing contradictory statements between yoga and your escitalopram that you're going to be prescribing. Although you are right in a way to believe so, because most people who talk about traditional systems of intervention, they tend to be so dogmatic and would want you to first understand, give up those medicines, only then this will work. And there are a lot of our people who are also equally dogmatic that if have learned biology in a scientific way, all these imaginary traditional methods are quackery. So there are extreme viewpoints, exclusive viewpoints, which are there in both systems. But I think we have all grown up with both systems being together. I know if they're not complementary, they're definitely not contradictory.
With your permission, can I say something?
Sir, I was going, yes, ma'am. Over to the chairperson. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that there is biological evidence coming up in favor of spirituality. So this is an answer to what the question was raised. And we know there is enough evidence to show that a spiritual life decreases the level of stress in life, which is linked to so many disorders. That is one. And the second thing is we have the famous nun study. This is a very interesting study where when the brains of the nuns were opened after their death, post-mortem was done, they had manifestations of Alzheimer's, but during their life, there was no manifestation. And the conclusion was God saved them. Why God saved them? Because they led a spiritual life. So I just want to say that now we are having biological evidence that spirituality actually does have a positive effect on the various systems of the body, including the brain. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There are many questions, but I know Abdesh sir has also asked a question, and I will come to Dr. O.P. Singh sir as well. There's just one more question, Professor Gangadhar sir, that I will take from the audience. The question is, how to practice higher consciousness as a clinical application to bring about good mental health? This question has come from Dr. Mahesh. How to practice higher consciousness as a clinical application to good mental health. So.
Okay, I also want you to keep in mind, higher consciousness is going to really get you better. Sugar is sweet, higher sugar is diabetes. Some people tolerate higher levels, but some others do not. So there is no reason to believe consciousness, higher consciousness, and higher mental health. Consciousness, when you have to elevate oneself, one also has to do that sadhana of having restraint over it and having an ability to control over this. Else, we end up as Bhasmasuras. It turns inwards, that energy. So, in fact, many yoga teachers, when they talk about practices of meditation and dhyana, they say, please don't do it in individuals who probably be having schizophrenia or won't have schizophrenia like syndromes. They can break down. So it is important that when I am talking of higher consciousness, I don't think that all that would be beneficial to every individual. You have to take a measure whether this person has been otherwise a spiritual lifestyle he has been having. Ask him or her to keep growing that spiritual lifestyle, the consciousness keeps elevating. And you have no way of actually giving that one spoonful of consciousness to this individual so that this consciousness expands. You have no way of adding that. It is he who makes it grow within himself. All you know is you tell him that these are all the ways, but how well he will practice or she will practice and make it grow. Many people who are transcendentally evolving realize that there are some limits beyond which he or she do not want to go. They know that they are overdoing it. So each one has his own tolerance limits of growing that consciousness, and there is unfortunately no dose dependent expressions of this consciousness in a given individual, and it is not externally measurable, and it's not under the therapist's control. So put together your question, I hope I have answered in the way in which I have been able to verbalize the whole thing. There could be many other ways in which others may want to share this viewpoint.
True, sir. I will request my guru, Professor O.P. Singh sir, is also chairing this session today, to from his chairperson's point of view to ask, and then I'll request Dr. Abdesh Sharma. He's already put a question, so sir will ask the question directly. Over to you, O.P. Singh sir.
There is nothing to say because sir has beautifully explained, and the question answer is also, because a lot of debate is going on biology. So what does mean? Biology means only medicines. All things are biology, and the brain changes are occurring, which is demonstrable. So only medicines are biology or nothing else is biology. I don't understand from where this concept is coming. This is something which is very, very ridiculous kind of concept. And sir has very beautifully explained the changes in the brain, which is occurring due to yoga and other all other things affect brain. And in the basic, what we call in scientific term, basic layman scientific terms, humans are basically social animals. And when our social, we have evolved socially for doing others, good to others, and gives us pleasure and takes us better. And yoga and spirituality also teaches us this connectedness with others, and also doing good to others and good to yourself. So that is wonderful, sir. Again, my pranam to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, O.P. Singh sir. Abdesh Sharma sir, who is the main advisor and the life link of this group. So over to you.
You know, a small thing I would like to share, and like to ask a question to Dr. Gangadhar, because he has been in hands for a long period of time, which for most people it is seen as the mecca of mental health. You know, when I was a student 40 years back, there was a scientific theory of dopamine causing schizophrenia. Now that was the so-called scientific reality then. Today it is not a scientific reality. We had probably 7 or 8 medication. That was the scientific reality then. We don't have it now. The brain changes were not seen at that point of time. What we are seeing today is that the scientific reality, it was then. If people get better with therapy versus medication versus self-help, which is the scientific reality. And even within the same country, 10 different practitioners would be following 10 different paths of healing, which is the scientific reality. I think one of the most important things that we need to ask is, can we, at the end of it all, help a person? And in that, probably integrating spirituality, which we are talking about today, is giving the tools for all of us mental health practitioners. Because, initially we often heard, is spirituality, and like the young person who was not named, who said that he feels a little ostracized, and whether it is under the purview of psychiatry. The fact of the matter is that today we have vibrant section like the present one in IPS. We have very vibrant caucuses in Royal College, in American Psychiatric Association, in New Zealand and Australian Psychiatric Association, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Middle East, in African countries. The fact of the matter is that people are looking for answers, and more than us, the population at large is looking for answers. Unless we incorporate what people are seeking, we will not be complete healers. And it is in that context that spirituality, especially with the emerging research that has happened in last about 20 years, needs to become a part of our armamentarium. Or at least we should be humble enough to say, okay, I don't handle this, but I know somebody else. Like I may say, okay, a therapist is able to, because I haven't learned much about therapy. I am only a biological psychiatrist. In which case, then we probably don't have to have a need, even for psychiatrists to interview a patient. They can go probably do some kind of a checklist and then come up with possible medication that are required. That's not how mental health is being practiced, and that is not how it should be practiced. And that's why probably it is very much under the purview of mental health professionals. I don't know what Dr. Gangadhar's view has been as 3 or 4 decades while he has been at NIMHANS. What changes has he seen, and whether those changes are here to stay?
Yeah, almost about a decade and a half back, when I addressed one of the psychiatric groups, I did talk about, I brought about a suggestion that traditional interventions such as yoga should become a part of the mental health team, just as that, as we said, a psychologist, a social worker, a nurse was the mental health team. A yoga or interventionist should also be a part of our team. There are places where these will be very helpful, but the issue remains objectivizing it and measuring who can be that person who will actually teach spirituality. So one of the manifestations of teaching spirituality would be to teach yoga and make sure that yoga is practiced as mindfully as possible. That is the way of putting spirituality into place in a given individual. And we have seen that spiritual lifestyle of yoga has brought about some benefits which otherwise might have been missed in these individuals. So having said this, the first step of introducing spirituality in mental health practice is to help people practice yoga and meditation. Although the word yoga and meditation is not something that I would like to use, but it has come into place. Yoga is meditation. And like I said, yoga includes all those 8 limbs, and each of those limbs are equally important. And how much of the blend that need to be made for a given individual, I'm sure each clinician will take a decision. And like I mentioned in the beginning of this today's session, before the session started, we have made this beginning, put a yoga services in all the mental hospitals as a part of our interventional procedures. And I'm hoping that if this happens, if we have made the first step, whatever benefits that we found in putting yoga into clinical practice, we think others should also try to exploit it for the betterment of our patients. I still feel that I live, and all of us are living, I'm sure you are living more than me, for the benefit of the patients. Right now, I'm living for the benefit of this particular organization, if I can, but you have all lived for the benefit of the patients. And so Paropakara Punyaya is already there in you. And I believe yoga can be an addition into all of our armamentarium.
Thank you, sir. So whilst we were listening to you, there has been another 10 questions that has come in the chat box. And as a moderator, I'm struggling because I'll be disappointing most people. But what we will do is we will be collecting all the questions. We're saving all the questions. And probably when we upload the whole thing in the YouTube channel of Indian Psychiatric Society official channel, we will try to answer the questions in the comment box. So give us some time. I'm not promising we will try. But sir, I will take a few minutes of your time. Some very interesting question has come. One from Dr. Kuldeep Paul, he asks, do we shut our sense organs or do we conquer them? Very practical. Do we shut our sense organs or do we conquer them in this journey of spirituality?
In fact, you shouldn't shut your sense organs, but you should have mastery over your sense organs. You should decide what to be left inside and what ought not to be left inside. So it's not the question of switch off or on. You should be able to fine tune that at your will. And that is yoga.
So another very practical thing, because a lot of times religion and spirituality discussions come. What's the difference? What's the commonality? Where is the Venn diagram intersecting? But for an atheist, there's a question. So what is the difference between spirituality and compassion for an atheist? So looking at an atheist point of view, what is the difference between spirituality and compassion? There's a question from Puneet Varma.
I don't know the definition of atheism, nor would I be able to find the difference between spirituality and compassion. Like I mentioned in this talk, they are almost synonymous. But I don't know how atheist is different from another individual. I believe the difference is same if it is there, whether it is an atheist or non-atheist. Atheists can be as spiritual as you and me. So theism has no business, but theism is another route. But you can afford to reach spirituality without being theistic. So atheist is not another individual, is one of us.
Well, beautifully defined, sir, because this is the thing that we need to talk about. You know, every aspect of spirituality needs to be covered. Now, because this is the last question from the audience that I will be taking for sir, because it's a Guru Purnima day, and the question has come from Dr. Satish Parma. What is the role of a guru in spirituality? Can one learn spirituality by himself, or do we need a guru?
You want me to answer this?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see.
Because you are the guru of gurus of psychiatry.
No. There's no guru there. Guru is that ideal I want to become. In fact, Shankara was taught by Shiva. Shiva was maunam. He didn't even talk. And Shankara had to imagine what Shiva is, and he grew to become Shiva. So, Shivam Bhutva, Shivam Yajet. So the guru is idealizing yourself as that person. And that's how that Ekalavya wanted to get Drona as his guru. Drona didn't teach him, but he wanted to be himself a Drona. So all of us not necessarily idealize an individual, not necessarily get that ideals taught by that individual. You try to reach those ideals of that guru. You got that guru teaching you. So in other words, no guru teaches. You learn from the guru. Thank you.
On that note, I will hand this session back to our chairpersons because I know a lot of seniors. Our president, sir, is here. Dr. Gautam Shah and Dr. Prasad Rao, sir, is here. So back to Dr. Sharma and Dr. O.P. Singh, sir, to take the rest of the session forward and then conclude. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
I would like to wholeheartedly thank Professor Gangadhar for this very enlightening lecture. And I think all of us have learned a lot, and I have personally been benefited a great lot. And what I would like to say, that the take-home message which one can take from this lecture and the very lively discussions that we have had is that spirituality should be a part of healthy lifestyle. This is very important take-home message. And with these words, I would like to thank Professor B.N. Gangadhar with folded hands and all the participants who have come here and to attend this lecture, and the President, Professor Gautam Saha, Dr. O.P. Singh, the other office bearers who are here, I thank all of you, Dr. Tufan Pati, Dr. Naresh, Dr. Avdesh Sharma, I thank all of you. I think your input in this program has been very, very important, and we all have learned a lot today. So with these words, I would say namaskar, thank you very much. And I would now like to hand the mic to the co-chairperson, that is Dr. Naresh.
Dr. Om Prakash, sir.
No, okay, Naresh, you can take
Yeah.
No,
you can
Mishra
continue,
ji is there if he wants to speak something.
Yes, I think a lot of seniors are here, Naresh Bhai.
And
Dr. Prasad Rao sir is there.
Prasad Rao sir is there.
Anyone who
brief
wants to
from-
talk, they can just unmute yourself and then have few words.
Gautam Da, Dr. Shaha, Gautam Da.
Dr. T.S.
Mishra sir is
also
here.
was there somewhere.
Dr. TSS Rao is there.
Yes.
This was excellent. This was an excellent talk. And spirituality is an experience per se. And you cannot explain everything spiritual in a biological basis. So we should not look for the all biological spirituality per se. And everything to experience. So that is my actually short contribution. And it was excellent by Gangadhar sir and nothing more to.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra ji. Dr. Gautam Saha, our president, few words. Dada.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually on the road in the car, so I don't know whether internet is working or not. But the thing is, my pranam to Dr. B.N. Gangadhar for excellent presentation. I listen most of the time, and it was really great that. And I also believe that something, if you give the happiness, spirituality is not thing that you have to incorporate somebody's mind. It will come, I think, very instinctively, it will come in everybody's mind. Maybe somebody is in the early life or the later life. It is not depends on the age, it is depends on the mentality. And as I also believe what Dr. O.P. Singh said, not only biology is medicine, we have divided in our therapy or treatment part is a biological, non-biological, like this. It is not that every therapy is biological. The mainstay of treatment, we are talking about the lifestyle modification. Though it is also biological. And spiritual therapy is also, it is not a therapy. Being a spiritual of a person is definitely helps a lot. Regarding religion, there are lots of studies, but the client or the people should have some belief on the religion, then it will work. Evidence-based studies shows like that. And spirituality in general, I am telling, it's really good. And once a time will come to everybody's life to become a spiritual, I think that will definitely help. If it is not there, then definitely, but in therapeutic value, it is there, but it will come not, we have to instill this spirituality to anybody's mind, it will come automatically. That is why the awareness is very important. Thank you so much. This is my belief, my idea. I don't know, Dr. Gangadhar, what will say about this, sir.
Yes, sir. Anyone else who wants to talk, they can unmute and they can talk. Dr. Shubhangi madam is there. Dr. Harihar. Dr. Ashok Reddy sir. Okay. Sir,
Reddy,
Dr.
please
Ashok, you have
unmute
to unmute,
yourself.
sir.
Yes, unmute, sir.
So, Ashok Reddy, sir, you have to unmute, sir.
Right.
Yes.
I would just like to convey my pranams to my Guru, Dr. Bhuyan, who has taught me throughout my life. I enjoyed psychiatry from a very long time, learning from him. Every moment what I spend with him, I learn something from him always in a humble way. And this session has added that we are supposed to have added dimension of spirituality at every stage of our service to our mentally ill patients. That's what I learned, and it will increase my input, spiritual input in treatment of my patients in a better life. Thank you very much, sir. Again.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else who wants to talk? Anyone else wants to give few words? Right.
Can I have 1, 2 or 2 minutes?
Yes, sir. Dr. Tufan
Yes.
sir.
Thank you. So, what I want to express it as my personal view. We have heard something about a dichotomy between being biological or spiritual. What I sincerely believe is biological therapies, biological approach is also spiritual in essence. Scientific advancement and spiritual progression, both of them, both of the pathways are conquests and search for the truth. And the ultimate truth is the one. This apparent illusory difference, if any, to someone is because of the deficit in knowledge as is available to us now. And both of the spheres are expensive. So one has to realize that. And another point I want to make clear that everyone, as Dr. Gangadhar observed, is spiritual inherently. Irrespective of his understanding of spiritualism, irrespective of his realization, and irrespective of the fact that whether he believes in a particular religion or not, he could be atheist too. So this is essential clinically to us, because in order to understand a patient, interview a patient, communicate to a patient, and convey him what we want to, and that too beyond a physical plane, one must understand his spiritual endowments as much as possible. This is essential. And this is not only true for us, this is true for all the clinicians, all the doctors, and all the professionals who have to have human interaction. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Tufan sir. I think we'll try to conclude. And a few concluding words. I think there was a discussion between biological and spiritual. I mean, we all know that thought itself is biological, and we all know that belief itself is biological. So when we say that the belief or the thought, it means that we are biological. And when we say science, science is externalizing and evidence-based. And spirituality per se is internalizing it or experiential. And today's lecture, I think it's wonderful that Dr. Gangadhar sir, both as a scientist and as a spiritual person, has amalgamated both of them, right? He's converged both scientific thought into what a spiritual thought as well. So I think that's what it is. And when we look at the therapies, when we look at some of the physical therapies, or we'd say physics therapies, sound therapy is there, light therapy is there, music therapy is there, touch therapy is there. All these are biological therapies itself. So what is the difference? I mean, we are all biological people and everything is biological. So Dr. Om Prakash has said that it is, I mean, when we talk about biological, there's no differentiation between spirituality and biological when we are thinking in terms of therapy as well. Right. So I think that was wonderfully brought out. And about the religious practices, they are subsets of spiritual health. Right. So apart from various practices that we have, Dr. Indra Sharma and Dr. Gangadhar has mentioned that there were so many spiritual practices. Like yoga is one of the, I mean, the Ashtanga yoga, so many practices are there. So they are part of the spiritual health, and then which aids in various psychiatric illnesses as well as mental health as well. So I would like to hand over with these few words. I would like to hand over to Dr. Praveer Varatkar, who would do the vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Namaskar. So today it's indeed a very auspicious day. Today we have celebrated Guru Purnima, and to end the day, it is almost 2 hours we have been talking about spirituality. All the psychiatrists, mental health professionals are talking about psychiatry. It is indeed a very welcome sign, and I thank IPS national team for giving the spirituality and the mental health task force the slot for today's episode to be conducted. For that, I thank, first of all, Padma Shri, ex-director of NIMHANS, Dr. B.N. Gangadhar. His endorsement for the yoga as well as for clinical application of the spirituality into the mental health will have a very long lasting impact on all those who have attended and all those who will be viewing on YouTube in coming days. In fact, it will be, I'm very sure even the atheist will now have his belief in spirituality very much intact. At the same time, I'm very thankful for towards Dr. Indra Sharma and Dr. O.P. Singh for chairing the session today. We are also very thankful for our super energetic moderator of today's and the chairperson of the Spirituality and Mental Health Task Force, Dr. Rajshri Ray, and equally complimenting Dr. Naresh Bhai. And at the last, I would say all the participants and all those who have been actively involved in talking about the spirituality, asking the questions and making it quite relevant. Now, it is not that we are going to have a discussion about the validity of spirituality. In fact, now we are moving toward the applicability of the spirituality into the clinical practice. And for that, I'm very thankful for all the participation by you all people. With this, I conclude myself, and we look forward for the another enriching and actively participation from you all. Thank you. Over to you, Naresh Bhai.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Praveer Bhadadkar. I think we have just concluded the session, the webinar, like we say, as series 1 or sessions 1, season 1. It is season 1 and episode 2. And that's what Dr. Rajshri wants to call it. Yes, I would like to thank Dr. Gangadhar. It was a wonderful learning experience for every one of us, and the great inputs from the chairpersons, Dr. Indra Sharma ji and Dr. Om Prakash ji as well, and Dr. Tufan Pati ji, who has chipped in as well. And Dr. Rajshri Didi, I just want to hand it over to you to make the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Naresh Bhai. My very special thanks to Praveer Bhai for being a fantastic person all through, and Dr. Avdesh Sharma sir for leading us through this journey, and of course, Gotanda, Opida, and everyone. And my humble thanks to Cipla for sponsoring or sort of being the educational partner and the digital platform provider, and for beautifully, organizing this and hosting this session. To the whole team of Cipla, thank you very much. Of course, it is Guru Purnima, and my thanks to all our gurus with with the flowers on my guru's feet. I just want to say that it has been a great session. We will meet you again in 2 weeks' time with another episode coming up. So please be with us. Dr. Tufan Pati sir, thank you so much for your blessing.
Thank you, Dr. Gangadhar sir, and everyone else.
Thank you, sir.
We'll take a leave.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, sir. Good night, sir. Thank you, sir. Good night, ma'am.
Thank you, Indira ma'am. Good night. Thank you, ma'am. Durga ji, thank you.
Ma'am. Good night, ma'am.
Pankaj ji, Sharvuri, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am, very much.
Dr. Indra Sharma ji,
Rajeshri, thank you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for the trouble you had, ma'am.
No, thank you very much. You did
Thank you,
very well.
Rajshri and Dr. Naresh.
Hard work.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. Good night, sir. Thank you.